Hey, it's Andrew with the Market Mindset. Thought we'd jump on and do a little bit of a test, check and see who's out there. And this is the place to come if you want to talk about the energy transition, what it's going to take. As you know, whether it's JPMorgan or Goldman Sachs, they say that critical metals will be the next thing you're going to hear a lot about. We've been hearing a lot about it for the last little while. We've certainly been talking about it for about 6 or 7 years, but that is coming. If you think the chip war is important, believe me, this is the next stage. And why I brought it up today, because there's an article out today in the Toronto Star saying, why not allow China to build its EVs for Canadians here? And we won't go through the entire article. And, I don't mean to, it's got nothing to do with the author here. It's an opinion piece. Why not? And the obvious answer is no, you don't want that. And there's a lot of obvious reasons for that. And the narrative around this is, of course, why not make there be cheaper, competitive solutions for Canadians to drive electric vehicles rather than what is being offered today and in the future here? Why would we impose tariffs? Well, it's not being protectionist. I mean, technically it is being protectionist. You should be protectionist, and also we should be decoupling to a very large extent from China, which has nothing to do with China, its people, its history, anything else. It just simply comes down to it's run by the Chinese Communist Party. I know that a lot of people say, well, it's not really communist. Very few people have studied politics in any way to understand exactly what communism is or isn't. And terms like that get thrown around so much nowadays. It's called that for a reason. It's authoritarian. And one would have to take the basic assumption that they don't really have our best interests at heart. And a lot of those people that come from China, a lot of them came because they didn't want to live under that system. They liked freedom. So the other thing I want to put into context is that this has nothing against Chinese people. The Chinese people have an amazing, rich culture. I've actually studied a little bit of Chinese history. It's incredible. It's really wild. The language, the history, it's wonderful. And there's a lot to learn. There's lots of similarities between Western and Chinese beliefs and in history with, love for family, and you name it. So there's lots of similarities. Of which communism has nothing in common. Communism isn't a Chinese natural form or historical way of living. So it isn't really something that's entrenched into their culture. In fact, Mao's long, great march was to destroy, much like you see here today, the history of China, its noble accomplishments, any of its achievements, its history, its culture, to destroy all that to create the new, better vision of the world. And you can see that happening here in the West right now. And we don't need more of that. So it says, taking the car situation as being the catalyst. Well, because we won't be able to meet our emission standards for the Paris Accord. So first off, the Paris Accord is meaningless as far as I'm concerned in regards to Canada. Canada's emissions are negligible. They're almost a statistical error that we have, I think it's something like 2.8% of emissions come from Canada. If we all stopped working, we all stopped driving, we all shut down industry, it has almost no effect on the entire planet. So to pretend that if we all drive EVs, that's going to help in some significant way, it's just not held up by any reality. So we should be doing our part. I'm all for that. Canada is a leader in technology. We should be leading our part in mining and metals. There's a lot of things we should be leading our part in, and we're not. What we don't need is to entice other countries to come in to build things for us. We should be investing in Canadians to build Canadian companies to solve these problems, to be having our extraction of Canadian natural resources that we've been gifted with to all the solutions that can come, whether it is battery gigafactories, whether it's car companies, that entire supply chain. That's a normal, natural thing that anybody who's leading a country would do. We want to make our country financially stronger and secure. Now, that being said, you want to couple that with the fact that trade is one of the best ways to keep good relations with people. And we want that. We want good relations with China, and you want to be able to, keep from escalating by having good trade. He makes the argument that, we should think twice because there's $22 billion at stake from trading with China. There's nothing at stake. Most of that is refining for copper and nickel, which we should be doing here anyway. We should be building mills and refining these critical metals here in Canada and in the West. And then food. They're not going to not accept food, whether it's potash or direct grapeseed and you name it. They need food. So the thought that they're just going to stop ordering food or the critical metals that they're using up like crazy, there's nothing at stake. There's no $22 billion at stake. And I'm happy to defend that at any time. So we're actually at a very strong point if we felt like it, if we had leadership. And not only that is some of these deals as well that he brings up, there's Stellantis and there's Volkswagen, there's billions of dollars being pumped into that. That could have been properly applied to a bunch of Canadian businesses to lift up the Canadian people. And once again, having a gigafactory here is great. It certainly helps. But once again, it's not because of emissions. And whether or not Canada made some sort of deal to get it from 2.8 to 2.7, once again, has no effect on the planet. It just doesn't. And if you're not sure about how numbers work in big numbers and small numbers, that's just reality. If you really are concerned about the environment, you should be concerned about those who are the biggest emitters. You and I are not that. We're not. As much as the media wants to tell you that we're the problem, we're not. And although it's nice for you to do things in order to feel good that you're part of a solution and you're part of the team, it's very little. It's just more for it's not virtue signaling, but essentially it's just hey, good for you. It's not having an impact. And this is for someone who really wants clean air, clean water, an extension of it not being about carbon emissions, but about pollution entirely. That I want better standards for all of pollution, a bigger conversation rather than let's just focus on carbon emissions. So what we need here is, and it's not a matter of protectionism, it's common sense, is we need to build our strong core group of people that have the same values and to have a supply chain that can supply Canada, the West, strengthen our own country with the obvious acknowledgement of changing allegiances and changing polarization in the world. We can see with the BRICS really, mounting vigorously, and they're going to have some announcements, I believe, in November. We're seeing a big divide in the world, and it isn't a matter of being, we're scared of this or that or whatnot, or we're just going to do what the U.S. says. It's common sense that we should be looking towards developing all of these things on our own, that we shouldn't have to ship things off to China to then have us, buy the end products from them. That doesn't make any sense. And this idea of NIMBY, like not my backyard, if you, once again, are a true environmentalist and you do love the environment, just closing your eyes and pretending that it's not your backyard, but China's polluting, or that Indonesia just dumps into the ocean, or that any of these locations has no effect on the rest of the planet, that doesn't hold up anymore. So it's better that we look to our own backyard and say, if we do this here and we do this with precision and we do it as cleanly as possibly with a clean source of energy, then we have a say. And we have a chance at really creating a future, and also the technology and the systems that other people will eventually copy. So just my little rant. It was a good article that gets discussion. And once again, these are good discussions to have. I think it's a very naive perspective. He mentions, if you look back in the 80s, we had done this with Japan with protectionism. The idea of possibly comparing Japan to China is, I'd say, a little bit off, but sort of like saying North and South Korea. There's nothing in common with these two countries. They're not the same. They weren't the same in the 80s. They're not the same today. They're very different cultures, and they're very different political systems. So if you think that dealing with North Korea is dealing exactly the same as South Korea, yeah, that's a good comparison. But it's simply factually not true. We've got a huge hand that's held here. We just don't know it. We've got so many positives here in Canada, but we're just told we don't. And we do. And it's not only because we've got all the natural resources, all the critical metals that are here. It's because we've got a brainstem, a brain power here. And a lot of people will point directly to Waterloo, but beyond Waterloo, of huge potential that's just not being utilized. And it really has to. And hopefully we're going to see a regime change and an encouragement to focus on all the optimism and all the solutions that Canada can provide, rather than feeling terrible and all the chaos and the crumbling economy and all the negative of all the harm we've done, all the terrible things, and we're to blame for this and that and everything else, where it's simply not true. So just my little rant. Love to hear your comments, and we look forward to chatting again soon.